The courtroom smelled faintly of paper and old wood polish. The air was still and too still, the kind of silence that made every shuffle of shoes echo like thunder. At the defense table sat Maria Harris, a single mother in her 30s, her hands clasped tightly together. She wore a modest blouse and the same pair of shoes she used for work at the diner. Her eyes were tired but not defeated. Beside her sat her son Eli, only 9 years old, swinging his legs just above the floor. He wore his Sunday clothes, a white shirt tucked into slightly oversized pants, a little bow tie he'd insisted on wearing because, as he told his mom that morning, lawyers wear ties, so I will too. Across the room, 2 lawyers representing the landlord shuffled their papers, whispering and glancing occasionally toward Eli. Their quiet laughter wasn't cruel, just careless, the kind that comes from people too certain of their own importance. The judge, Hon Richard Mallory, adjusted his glasses. "Ms. Harris," he said gently, "you understand that representing yourself in a civil case is allowed, but this is a complicated matter." Maria nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I can't afford an attorney, but I have everything here." She held up a worn folder. "Every rent receipt, every maintenance request, and I have my son who helped me put it all in order." A faint smile tugged at the judge's lips. "Your son helped?" Eli straightened proudly. "Yes, sir." "I made charts," the courtroom chuckled softly. The lead lawyer, Mr. Dunning, smirked. "Your Honor, with respect, I don't think charts drawn by a 9-year-old are admissible evidence." The judge glanced at Eli. "We'll see." "Mr. Dunning, sometimes the simplest evidence speaks the loudest." It had started 2 months earlier. When Maria received an eviction notice for property damage she didn't cause. She had lived in the same small apartment for years, paying her rent on time. But when a leak in the ceiling destroyed part of the floor, her landlord blamed her and demanded thousands in repairs. She tried explaining. She wrote letters, called the management office, even visited the city's housing authority. No one listened, but Eli did. He'd watched his mom cry one night at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers and unpaid bills. He had quietly brought her a glass of water and said, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll help." At first, she thought he meant help by staying out of the way. But the next morning, Eli sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and colored pencils. "Mom," he said, "if we show them what really happened, like in school science projects, they'll have to listen." Maria had smiled through her exhaustion. "Baby, it doesn't work like that in court." "Then we'll make it work," he said. And somehow she believed him. For the next few weeks, every evening after dinner, they worked together. Eli measured the leak with a ruler, marked dates on a calendar, and even learned how to type up their timeline on her old laptop. He'd found a YouTube video about how judges decide things and proudly announced one night, "Mom, judges like evidence and facts. Feelings are fine, but you gotta show proof." Maria laughed. "Oh, really? Sounds like you're the lawyer here." "I'm your helper," Eli said seriously. "You do the talking, I'll do the showing." He drew simple diagrams of their apartment, colored the damage spots blue, and made a big title page that read, "What Really Happened at 412 Maple Street." Maria had hugged him then, tears catching in her throat. "You're my little lawyer," he grinned. Lawyer in training. Now sitting in the courtroom, Eli held that same folder tightly on his lap. The judge began reviewing the opening arguments. The landlord's lawyers spoke first, filling the room with complicated language, negligence or breach, structural compromise. When they finished, the judge turned to Maria. "Ms. Harris, your turn." Maria stood, voice trembling slightly. "Your Honor, I didn't damage anything. The leak started months ago. I asked for help many times, but no one fixed it. My son and I kept records." Eli tugged her sleeve gently. "Show him the book, Mom." She handed the folder to the bailiff, who brought it to the judge. He opened it slowly, adjusting his glasses again. Inside were hand-drawn charts, receipts taped neatly, and little notes in pencil beside each one. "Roof leak still dripping. Ceiling crack bigger. Told Mr. Reeve again." And at the very end, a photo printed from Maria's phone, showing Eli standing under a blue bucket catching water from the ceiling. The courtroom went quiet. Even the opposing lawyers stopped flipping their pages. The judge looked up, then at Eli. "Did you make these notes?" Eli nodded. "Yes, sir. I wanted to show it like a story, so people would believe Mom." The judge smiled softly. "That's quite a story, son. Eli straightened. It's all true. Outside, rain began to patter against the courthouse windows. Inside, the judge leaned back thoughtfully, flipping through the pages again. He closed the folder gently. I think we'll take a short recess. Mr. Dunning, I'll want to review the maintenance reports from your client before we proceed. Mr. Dunning hesitated. Of course, Your Honor. As the gavel tapped, Maria exhaled for the first time all morning. She looked at Eli and whispered, You did it, sweetheart. Eli smiled shyly. Not yet, Mom. We just told the truth. Now we wait. When court resumed after the short recess, the mood was noticeably different. The soft laughter that had floated through the room earlier was gone. Even Mr. Dunning, the landlord's lead attorney, looked uneasy as he shuffled his notes. Judge Mallory glanced down at Maria's folder once more before addressing the courtroom. Mr. Dunning, he said, I've reviewed the documentation submitted by Miss Harris and her son. I see consistent reporting of maintenance issues, with dates, photos, and receipts. Do you have any evidence that contradicts these? Mr. Dunning hesitated. Your Honor, we maintain that the tenant failed to... The judge interrupted calmly. Do you have records showing the landlord responded to these reports? Dunning flipped a page. We don't have all the documentation on hand. Mallory leaned back. Then I'll wait. The courtroom went still. Eli sat quietly beside his mom, his small hands folded over the edge of the table. He didn't fidget. He didn't speak. He just watched. After a moment, he leaned close to his mother and whispered, Mom, they didn't bring the letters we sent. Maria glanced down at him. I know, baby. Can I tell him? Eli asked. She hesitated, then looked toward the judge. Your Honor, may my son speak? Just for a moment. A murmur ran through the courtroom. The judge tilted his head, curious. You want to speak, young man? Eli nodded. Yes, sir. Just about the letters. The judge's lips curved into a faint smile. All right, then. Come forward. But remember, you're not here to argue, just to explain. Yes, sir. Eli walked carefully up to the witness stand, his shoes clicking softly on the tile. The bailiff raised a brow but smiled as the boy stood tall, placing one small hand on the Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes, sir, Eli said earnestly. The judge leaned forward slightly. You can start whenever you're ready. Eli took a breath. His voice was small but steady. My mom told the truth, he began. We wrote letters, 3 of them. 1 in January, 1 in February, and 1 in March. I helped type them, because she doesn't like using the computer much. Each time she asked for the ceiling to be fixed. He paused, glancing briefly at his mom. She smiled, eyes glistening. The water started dripping over my bed first, Eli continued. We moved my mattress to the floor so I wouldn't get wet. Then it dripped over the table. My mom put a bucket there. I remember the sound, plop, 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 every night. The courtroom was silent now. Mom said she'd call the office again. I wrote the dates on the calendar. I still have it. The judge nodded slowly. Oh, you kept records yourself? Yes, sir. Because at school my teacher says if you write things down, people believe you more. A few quiet chuckles spread through the gallery, not mocking this time, but moved. Eli continued, voice firm. The landlord never came. Not until the floor got soft and someone almost fell through. Then he said it was our fault. But that's not true. We tried to stop it. We even used tape and plastic. I have pictures. He looked down at the table where his folder sat. Can I show you? The judge nodded. Go ahead. Eli opened the folder carefully, laying out 3 photos. In one, a blue bucket sat under a dripping ceiling. In another, a towel was spread over warped wooden flooring. And in the third, Eli kneeling with a flashlight checking the wall. The judge studied them for a long moment, then looked at Mr. Dunning. Mr. Dunning, does your client dispute any of this? The attorney cleared his throat. We don't, Your Honor, but liability is... Judge Mallory held up a hand. Liability is a matter of action or inaction, counsel. And I see quite a bit of the latter. He turned back to Eli. You did a fine job documenting this, young man. Eli nodded respectfully. Thank you, sir. I just wanted people to listen to my mom. The judge's expression softened. I think they're listening now. When Eli returned to his seat, Maria took his hand. You were amazing, she whispered. He smiled shyly. I didn't do anything special. I just told what happened. That's what makes it special, she whispered back. By afternoon, the courtroom had shifted entirely. The landlord, now pale and visibly nervous, whispered urgently to his lawyer. Mr. Dunning finally stood. "Your Honor, my client would like to resolve this matter privately without further testimony." The judge adjusted his glasses. "Do you mean to offer a settlement?" "Yes, Your Honor." Mallory nodded once. "I see. We'll discuss terms after recess." He turned to Maria and Eli. "Ms. Harris, I believe your son just saved you 6 months of hearings." Maria smiled through tears. "I believe he saved me much more than that, Your Honor." The judge smiled softly. "Then we'll call that justice well served." He rapped the gavel once. "Court in recess." As people began to rise, Mr. Dunning approached quietly, looking uncharacteristically human. He cleared his throat. "Ms. Harris, young man, I owe you both an apology. I misjudged today." Eli looked up. "That's okay, sir. Grown-ups forget to listen sometimes." Dunning blinked, then chuckled softly. "You're right about that." He looked to Maria. "You raised quite a remarkable son." Maria smiled proudly. "He raised me a little too." That night back home, the leaky ceiling was finally patched, but the bucket stayed. Eli had washed it and placed it in the corner by his desk, where his drawings and charts still lay. When his mom asked why, he said, "To remind us how strong we were when nobody believed us." Maria kissed his forehead. "You're my hero, Eli." He shook his head, smiling. "No, Mom, you're mine." When court reconvened the following morning, the benches were full again. Word had spread about the boy who'd stood up for his mother, and how his clear, honest words had changed the entire case. Reporters weren't allowed inside the small courtroom, but a few local journalists waited by the doors, whispering among themselves. It wasn't every day that something good made its way into a courthouse story. Inside, Maria Harris sat at the same table, her posture calmer now, though her hands still trembled slightly from nerves. Beside her sat Eli, dressed once again in his small shirt and bow tie. He had insisted on wearing it. "If I wore it the first time, I should wear it again," he'd said. Across the aisle, the landlord and his attorney looked less sure of themselves. Gone was the dismissive smirk, replaced by the quiet unease of people who had been forced to see themselves clearly. Judge Mallory entered, taking his seat with the same composed grace as before. He looked over the courtroom, then directly at Eli. "Good morning again, Mr. Carter," he said, using the boy's last name with deliberate respect. "Good morning." "Your Honor," Eli said politely. The judge turned to both sides. "I've reviewed the settlement terms proposed yesterday. It appears the landlord has agreed to repair the apartment fully, refund 3 months of rent, and cover all legal fees." "Is that correct, Mr. Dunning?" Mr. Dunning nodded. "That's correct, Your Honor." Mallory turned toward Maria. "And you find this resolution acceptable, Ms. Harris?" "Yes, Your Honor, thank you," Maria said softly. Mallory smiled faintly. "Don't thank me, Ms. Harris, thank your son. His diligence did what most lawyers forget to do." It told the truth clearly. A soft murmur moved through the courtroom. Eli's cheeks flushed pink, and he looked down at his shoes. The judge leaned forward slightly. "Young man, would you come up here for a moment?" Eli hesitated, glancing at his mom. She nodded, smiling proudly. He walked toward the bench again, his small shoes echoing lightly across the floor. Judge Mallory stood, stepping down from the bench, something rarely done in his courtroom. He knelt slightly, bringing himself closer to Eli's height. "You know," the judge said gently, "I've been in this job for 20 years. I've seen people with more degrees than this room could count, but I haven't seen many who understand fairness the way you do." Eli blinked. "Fairness is just doing what's right even if nobody's watching," he said simply. The courtroom went silent. The judge's smile deepened. "That's exactly it." He glanced around the room. "Let this boy's words serve as a reminder. Justice isn't about who speaks the loudest. It's about who speaks the truth." He turned back to Eli. "You've reminded us all of that." The bailiff, standing by the door, swallowed hard. Even Mr. Dunning looked moved, his gaze fixed on the floor. When court adjourned, the judge shook Maria's hand and then bent to shake Eli's. "Keep asking questions," he said. "Keep learning. The world could use more people like you." "Yes." "Sir?" Eli said softly. As they left the courtroom, people who'd been sitting in the audience approached quietly. An older woman with tears in her eyes, a young law clerk, Ivan, a janitor who had been sweeping the hall. Each of them said something kind. "You were brave," or "Your mum must be proud," or "You made us all smile today." Maria thanked each of them, but she noticed something more profound. Not pity, not surprise, but respect. Outside, the late afternoon sun bathed the courthouse steps in gold. Maria held Eli's hand as they descended the stairs together. At the bottom waited 2 local reporters, holding small notepads. "Mrs. Harris," one said gently, "could we ask a few questions about your son?" Eli looked up, puzzled. "They want to ask me questions?" Maria smiled. "Looks like it." The reporter crouched to his level. "How did you know what to say in there?" Eli shrugged. "I didn't plan it. I just told the truth like my teacher says. Grown-ups sometimes make things too complicated." The reporters chuckled softly. "And what do you want to be when you grow up?" Eli thought for a moment. A teacher or a lawyer, but a nice one. That evening, back home, the tension that had weighed on the small apartment for months finally lifted. The repaired ceiling gleamed with fresh paint. The sound of dripping water had been replaced by laughter and the faint clatter of dinner plates. Maria sat at the kitchen table, watching her son flip through his old notebook. "You know," she said, "you really did something special today." Eli looked up. "I didn't do anything big, Mom. I just said what really happened." She smiled. "That's the biggest thing anyone can do." He grinned, closing his notebook. "Do you think they'll remember?" "Oh, I think they will," she said softly. Sometimes the right words stay longer than the verdict. That night, after Maria tucked him in, Eli whispered as she turned off the light, "Mom?" "Yes, sweetheart. Do you think I could help other people like we did today?" She leaned down and kissed his forehead. "You already are." Outside, the rain that had fallen the day before began again, soft, steady, harmless now. But inside, the little apartment felt warm, whole, and strong. Eli drifted to sleep with a faint smile, his bow tie still hanging on the chair by his bed, a quiet reminder of the day he proved that truth doesn't need power, only courage. 15 years later, the same courthouse still stood, older now, but unchanged in its quiet dignity. The wooden benches had been polished so many times they almost shone, and the old clock above the entrance ticked softly, marking decades of stories that had passed through its walls. And today, another one was beginning. The courtroom filled slowly, families, journalists, law students. A hearing had been scheduled for the swearing-in of a new assistant district attorney. It wasn't a large ceremony, but it carried meaning for everyone there. Judge Richard Mallory, now grayer but still sharp-eyed, adjusted his robe and smiled faintly as he reviewed the paperwork in front of him. When the doors opened, he looked up, and his smile deepened. Because walking down the aisle, tall and confident in a navy blue suit, was Eli Harris, the same boy who 15 years earlier had stood in that very room and turned quiet truth into justice. Now 24, Eli carried himself with the same calm certainty he had as a child. No arrogance, no theatrics, just presence. Behind him walked his mother, Maria, holding her head high, tears already glistening in her eyes. When the ceremony began, the clerk called his name, Elias Raymond Harris. Eli stepped forward to the bench. Judge Mallory smiled. "I've waited a long time to see this day, Mr. Harris." Eli smiled back. "I think we both did, Your Honor." The judge gestured to the Bible. "Raise your right hand." As Eli repeated the oath, his voice was steady. "To seek justice, to protect truth, and to serve with fairness." When he finished, the judge extended his hand. "Congratulations, Counselor." The audience applauded softly. Maria wiped her eyes, smiling so wide she couldn't speak. Judge Mallory leaned toward Eli and said quietly, "You once taught this courtroom what fairness meant. I suspect you're about to remind the rest of the world." Eli's eyes glistened. "Thank you, Your Honor. I'll do my best." After the ceremony, people lingered in the hall, friends, professors, former classmates. But Eli slipped away for a moment, walking alone to the small courtroom down the corridor, the one where it had all begun. He stepped inside quietly. The lights were dim, the benches empty. The air still carried that faint scent of old wood and dust. He walked to the front row, running a hand along the railing, remembering the sound of the rain that day, his mother's trembling voice, and the judge's kind eyes. He could still hear himself saying it. "I just wanted people to listen to my mum," he smiled. "Guess they finally did," he whispered. A few moments later, Maria appeared in the doorway. "I knew I'd find you here," she said softly. Eli turned, smiling. "Just saying thank you." "To who?" He looked around the empty room. "To the room itself, I think. It's where everything started." Maria stepped closer, her eyes filled with pride. "I used to pray that the world would see you the way I did that day. I guess it finally caught up." Eli laughed quietly. "You were the one who taught me how to stand up. I just used your courage." She shook her head, smiling through tears. "You used your heart." They stood in silence for a moment, mother and son, two souls who had walked through hardship together and come out stronger, never once losing their grace. That evening, as they left the courthouse, a light rain began to fall, the same kind of gentle drizzle that had tapped against the windows years ago. Maria paused under the awning, looking up at the sky. "Seems like every time it rains, something good happens." Eli smiled, holding out his hand to catch a few drops. "Then maybe it's not just rain. Maybe it's a reminder." "Of what?" she asked. "That sometimes," he said softly. "The smallest voice in the room can still change everything." She smiled. And they walked down the courthouse steps together, hand in hand, their reflections glimmering faintly in the wet pavement. Somewhere behind them, the courthouse clock struck 6, a sound steady and familiar, like truth itself.